Hello! Today we are going to find the percent of a number. Now remember, percent means per cent or for every 100. It's the part out of 100 that we would be counting. We also are going to remember how to set up a proportion. And the proportion is two ratios that we make equivalent. Your topic, once again, percent of a number. It's going on 75 and 76 of your interactive notebook. Today we're going to put in our notes section that we're taking notes on 12-6. We want to go back and revisit these notes at least 5 times. Every time you add questions, summaries, you use the notes to do your homework, to do Khan Academy, that counts as a revisit. Our essential question for today is, how do I set up a proportion to find the percent of a number? This is standard 6 ratios and proportions 3, and you should be able to find the percent of a quantity and find the whole given a part and a percent. So here's the magical formula that you need to remember, guys. You have, this is the percent sign, and this is what you have known. So when you look at a number, you take whatever the percent is and you put it over 100, and that is going to be your right-hand side of your proportion. And you're going to make it equivalent to having the part over the whole, or the is value over the of value. And you're like, the is and the of, I don't understand that. Well, let's look at an example and it might become more clear. So remembering that formula, let's look at our first example. 30 is what percent of 100? So we have is over of equals the percent over 100. So we have an is and we have an of. Okay? So if we look at this, we can say we have a 30 is, that's my is number, that's the part, and of 80, that's our whole. The is represents, that's a portion of the full amount. That's the part of the number. The of represents that it's of something, of a bigger part of the whole. So that's why this tells us what we put into that blank. Now, we have to put the other side of the proportion because you have to have 2 ratios. Now, we don't know what the percentage is. That's what we're trying to find out. That is our unknown. So I'm going to put a variable to clarify that that's the unknown. But we do know that it's going to be out of 100% because the whole amount of any percent is 100. So now that we've set up this proportion, we have multiple ways that we can solve it. I can look at relationships, but in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to solve it using cross product. So what you're going to do is you're going to find the 2 numbers that you have both present in the cross product. And I have 30 and 100. So I'm going to do 30 times 100 equals, now I have a 1 and a 3, that when I multiply those together I get 3. And how many zeros do I have? I have 1, 2, 3. That tells me that when I multiply 30 times 100, I'm going to get 3,000. So now what I need to do is I need to make this equal 3,000. So you would have 80 times n equals 3,000. And so now what you have to do is you have to solve this algebraically. To solve algebraically, you're going to have to learn a really important concept. That in concept is the idea of doing the opposite operation. You always want to get your variable, the unknown number, by itself. And to do that, you have to do whatever they are doing to that number, you have to do the opposite. You have to undo it. So looking at here, we've got our variable, and what are we doing to the variable? Trace, what are we doing to the variable? You're multiplying it by what? You're taking the n and you're multiplying the n by what? By 80, right. So what is the opposite of multiplying a number by 80? What's the opposite of multiplying? Dividing. So what is the opposite of multiplying by 80? It would be to divide by 80, right? So in this case, I'm going to take this and I'm going to divide it by 80. Which looks confusing on this side, right? You're like, there's 80 and there's 80 and there's an n and I don't know what to do. But here's the good news. When you do the opposite, these cross out and they're no longer your problem. They're gone. So now what I'm left with is n on this side. Now whatever you do over here, you have to do on the other side of the equation as well. So I have 3,000 over here. I'm going to divide this 3,000 also by 80. So now what I have to do is take my 3,000, put it in my division bar, the castle, divide it by 80. Well, how many times does 80 go into 30? None, right? What about 80 into 300? Can anybody tell me how many times 80 might go into 300? Christian? 3 times. What is 3 times 80? 240, because 3 times 8 is 24, and then we would add the zeros. So you've got 240. I'm going to subtract that, and I'm going to get 60. Bring down my 0. So if 80 goes into 300 3 times, how many times do we think 80 would go into 600? Miguel?
7 times.
7 times. Why didn't you do 8 times?
Because that'd be 64.
And it'd be too much. Good. So you figured what we had here, you kind of doubled it and kind of went, yeah. So if we do 7, what is 7 times 8? 56. So we have to add our 0, 5,600, or our 560, not 5,600, 560. Subtract it and you get 40. Now, what do I do next? What's the next step? Haley? Add a decimal, and drop a 0 down. Now, can 80 go into 400? No, scooch this up, okay? How many times can it go into it, Nicole? 5. 5 times 80 would be what? Well, 5 times 8 is what? 40, and then we have 1 0, right? So we would have 400. Subtract. All right. So now we know that it is 37.5. So in this case, 30 is what percent of 80? It is 37.5%. So let's try another one. Okay, guys? I'm going to actually kind of slide off the paper a little bit on this one, probably. All right, let's first circle our numbers. We have 15 is 20% of what number? When I say what number, what does that tell you? It's telling you what? That I don't know it, right? It's an unknown. What do I put for an unknown? An n, because it is a what? Variable. Anytime we don't know, when we say what, we're saying I don't know what it is, and therefore I'm going to put it in as a variable. So let's set up our proportion. This one's going to look slightly different, guys. You're going to have your is over your of. Do we have an is number? 15. Do we have an of number? Do we have a whole? 20%. That's not the of number. The of number is what number? So that tells you it is a n, or a variable. This, you got to read it, okay? So now you know you've got 20%. That's going to be your part of your percent over what is your whole of your percent? 100. Thank you. All right. So we have 15, 20, and 100. We want to figure out what this whole is. We want to know 15 is 20% of what number? So we're going to set up cross product again. we're going to do 15 times 100. 15 times 100 is going to be 15 times 1, which is what? 15. How many zeros do I have? Okay. So now, can somebody set up this one? What is that side going to look like? Chaz. You've got a 20 and you've got an n. I multiply these across, so what do I need to do with these ones? Multiply them across. So I'm going to have 20 times n equals this side, which was 1500, because they have to equal out. This side has to equal this side for it to be true. Okay? So now, I am multiplying n by 20. What is the opposite? How do I undo that? What's the opposite, Jacqueline?
You divide 1 into 1,500 by 20.
But what do I do first on the other side? Because I got to get that variable by itself. I do the same. You said I divide this side by 20, but in order to do that, I knew I needed to do it because I'm doing it on this side, right?
Yeah.
Correct. So I'm going to take 20n, because I really don't need that dot saying I'm multiplying. Anytime you have a variable next to a number, that tells you I multiply that number by that variable. I can now, there's a lot of ways to write dividing. When I do equations, I like to just do a fraction bar because it is easier. What?
20 multiplied by 75 is 1,500.
Okay, 1 second. So whatever I do on this side, I'm going to do on this side. And this, by the way, is exactly the same thing as writing it this way. A fraction bar means to divide. It means the same thing. So this side, 20 times n divided by 20, these are going to cross themselves out, and I'm going to end up with n equals, and I'm going to get 1,500 divided by 20. And Chaz said 20 goes into 1,500, what did you say? 75 times. So our answer here is 15 is 20% of 75. 15 is 20% of 75. Now, on page 65, we have another example that we're going to do. And this is going to be a word problem. Yes?
Could I just multiply 20 to get to 100 and then multiply the other number by 20?
So, you realize that 20 times 5 equals 100? So what Chaz pointed out, and it's a really good point, is sometimes there's proportional relationships, and they make it easier, and you don't have to do cross product. This cross product way of doing it will always work. Always. Without a doubt, you can always do cross product. Proportional relationship is much easier, but it does not always work as clearly. In this case, Chaz says, I noticed that 20 goes into 100 5 times. So then if that's the case, the relationship there is 20 times 5. Whatever you do over here, you can do over here. 15 times 5 is 75. I would be able to have solved it very simply. But let's look at this one. We didn't have a proportional relationship. I can't do something to 80 to get to 100, and I can't do something to 30 to get to 80, right, Chaz? So in this case, I had to do cross product. It was the easiest way for me to do it. If I didn't go across and cross multiply to make it equal out, I wouldn't have been able to find my answer. So it just depends. I always look for these ones, the ones that are easier, to do the proportional relationship first. Because I don't enjoy cross product, but whether I enjoy it or not is irrelevant when I want to get the right answer. So, good call on that one. Alright, let's go over here. We have 2 cousins sold 80 pizzas. 25% of the pizzas they sold were pepperoni. 30% were cheese pizza. or extra cheese, excuse me. How many pizzas were pepperoni? How many were extra cheese? Okay, so the first thing we're going to have is we're going to have A for pepperoni. So this is A, and this is going to be B for extra cheese. So we can separate our work out. Okay? We have 80 pizzas. 25% pepperoni, 30% extra cheese. One question, how many were pepperoni? Second question, how many were cheese? This is my A question. This is my B question. I want to make sure I'm using all of my numbers that I need and I'm answering both of my questions. That's why we mark the text, guys, because that way we can remember to answer all the questions. Alright, we also want to remember that we've got is over of equals percent over 100. So let's start with our pepperoni. We're going to have two proportions. We know our 100 is going to be there. Let's start filling in whatever else we can. Do we have a percentage for our pepperoni? Does someone see in the question above a percentage for the pepperoni? Riley. 25%. Good. We have a percentage. Okay. Do we know a part? No, guys. We're trying to figure that out. We want to figure out what part is pepperoni. Do we know a total for all the pizzas?
Yes.
What is the total, class, for all the pizzas? 80. All right. We set up a proportion. That's awesome. Is there a proportional relationship that we can use, or do we need to go to cross product? Riley, what do you see?
25 goes into 100 4 times.
Correct. So 25 goes into 100. Just stay seated. I know the bell's going to ring. 25 goes into 100 4 times. So 25 times 4 equals 100. Therefore, n times 4 should equal 80. What times 4 equals 80? Elizabeth? 20. So you would have n equals 20. So we have 20 pepperoni pizzas. Set up this side. We know the percent. We don't. What is the percent of cheese pizzas, guys?
30%.
Okay. What is the total pizzas? 80. You're going to figure out this one. There's not a proportional relationship we can use. So you have to use cross product. You're going to do this times this equals this times this. All right, guys, you're going to solve that on your own. Have a great